And if I didn't open that day, I probably went bankrupt, to be honest. It was really quite tight after a bit of a health scare back in 2016, 2017, was you can't do everything. You're not invincible. Take time to yourself. And I actually charged my friends for coming to my birthday party.
Obviously, a year prior, the whole Dragon's Den experience comes about.
Got the cash, and unfortunately, it fell through. One part that people really don't believe in themselves enough, self-doubt. It's anxieties and that, like I said earlier on, that gets in the way, the imposter syndrome.
Hello and welcome to the launch of our new podcast, Founders Unscripted. We're going to be taking a peek behind some businesses to hear the good, the bad and the ugly. And today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Jamie Hutcheon, who has a great story to tell, incredible journey. But before we dive in, for those who are watching or listening, they probably don't know that we're actually related distantly.
Yes.
I believe our grannies are sisters.
Yep.
Well, so we're told. But yeah, Jamie has a unique story, founded and exited, I guess you could say, Cocoa Ooze, while also scaling that business, appeared on Dragon's Den back in, what year was that?
2016.
2016, yep. Yeah. But is now mainly focused on helping other founders through your role at DYW,
yep.
As well as previous roles with Business Gateway. You've got a very infectious personality, which is fair to say, and yeah, first question I've got for you, a little bit personal, but how would those closest to you describe you?
A really interesting one, and something I did a couple of years ago was through my work, what people think about me and that, and because what you see at work is what you see personal life. I don't have the time or capacity to be any different. I suppose somebody who is deeply passionate, who doesn't really take kind of no for an answer, resilience, I would say, as well, and just quite fun to be around. I like to think that. I hope that comes across. But I like that people's company and enjoyment. So I would definitely think that probably get a 3 or 4 things that me. But I just want to be just in life, just me. What you see is what you get. I think that's so important. That we speak a lot about authenticity with with business owners and who we are. But yeah, what you see really is what you get. Fun, loving personality.
Yeah. So if you could summarize your kind of business and employment career so far in a couple of minutes, what are kind of the key things that stand out to you in terms of that journey?
I would say a roller coaster.
Yeah.
I would say I've had the privilege throughout my career of just either building something, helping somebody, supporting somebody, and even through my employee roles now, it's all about supporting the next generation, supporting businesses. But through my own, my own journey, I would say that running your own business is it's incredible. And I was 15 odd years of my life, 17 when I started my own business, but it was hugely isolating. It was quite demanding. It was daunting. I had a great team around about me, but I felt, the most isolated as an individual, but surround yourself with that good people, that good network. It's so important. But I think the challenge with that is that the buck stops at you. The pressure, the paying invoices, the work until whatever time it is. But I think what I really realised after a bit of a health scare back in 2016, 2017 was you can't do everything. You're not invincible. Take time to yourself. That yes, we can have a shop and open 7 days, but actually, is that productive of your time? And also a way to spend your time, and also that you can't do everything. So bring right people in at the right time. And I always say, you don't build a house with a shaky foundation. And as a business, you shouldn't do that either. And I know we always speak about, the business planning process and that. And I think as, founders, I was always, 10 steps ahead. But actually looking at it in perspective and going, well, what do we need to do to make it work? And actually looking back now, I would probably do it differently. Define my USP better. Have a better financial, robust kind of model. We can actually, rather than just, I'm going to say, wing it. And that's what entrepreneurs do. And great. And that's why we're innovative and creative individuals. But I think for me, my older, wiser self would now tell me to get your foundations right. And you can only build upon that. And it's the same way, I think in life we overcomplicate things. And I'm trying to kind of now simplify that and through what I'm doing in my role. But also I think I could have used that advice back when I had my own business.
Yeah.
we can't be everything to everybody. We can't do everything. Simple, but done well and done really well, and really actually the power of saying no. So I think all that is so important. I wish I had that 15 odd years ago now, to be honest. It's so critical.
So much in there, which I'm sure we'll dive into. But what was your kind of earliest experience of awareness around business entrepreneurship? I know you started at 17, but like, was there certain things growing up through family, through people you were surrounded with, that gave you a little bit of a snippet of an insight in terms of, there's a different route in terms of just employment in that?
Yeah, great question. And I think for me, some of my family haven't really had kind of business kind of backgrounds. My granddad did have his own smithy, but apart from that, nothing really from kind of growing up perspective. And I was actually thinking about this when I set up my own business. My dad did some kind of business of his own, but nothing really kind of with you. My dad was a joiner, my granddad was a smithy, but nothing really kind of businessy like per se. But I look back when I started when I was 17, and probably my first taste of entrepreneurship was actually in the secondary school, where I was making some sweet treats and actually selling them to people. And I remember I also created a birthday party for myself, but I made it as a business opportunity. So I hired a local hall, hired some disco equipment, and I actually charged my friends for coming to my birthday party. My mum found out about it, and she actually had to give everybody a refund because you can't charge people to come for your birthday party. So I look back now, and I didn't think it was actually that significant, because I just thought, I had to cover the costs, And actually looking back, that probably 2 instances were probably my first taste of entrepreneurship. It probably then died away, went through school, did all that. And I've always been a natural ambitious person. I'll never shy away from that, and I'm deeply passionate about if I get behind something, get involved in that cause. But I wasn't academic. I wasn't involved in school. So when I left at 15, I went to college. It was professional cookery. I got an apprenticeship at the Marcliffe. It was great. It really gave me some really good foundations. But I always knew there was something more there. And I do firmly believe that we're all entrepreneurs at heart. Some of us have a little, some of us have a lot. And I was kind of trying to curb that. Mm-hmm. And then went out a couple of courses, just to kind of understand a bit more about business. It really ignited my fire and opportunity. And I went, well, if nobody's doing this, well, I'll just dive in and do it. And I've always put 2 feet into something and did it. So that earlier, looking back now, actually probably set me up to have a good foundations and actually believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think for me, definitely did that. And yes, I was young, I was naive as a founder, but I think naivety probably played to my benefit, because I went in not knowing much, but I was eager and willing to learn.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of great people in the world that will happily put their hand out and help and support you.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes surround yourself with that good people. And I've been incredibly lucky to have various people, no one in particular, but just having that sounding board is so critical.
Yeah, superb. And that, I guess that 17-year-old with the bit between the teeth to get stuck in, you came up with the idea of Cocoa Ooze. Had that been something? Obviously, you mentioned charging your friends there for the birthday party and stuff, and you mentioned selling sweet treats at school. But had that always been an avenue you thought there was a gap, or a vibe that you thought, I enjoy that?
Yeah. I've always had a sweet tooth, to be honest. I've always been involved, and I'm gonna sugar, as I keep telling myself, to get fit to it. But probably my earliest instance, probably helping my nan in the kitchen. That's probably where it really came from. So school they do careers planning, and I was like, I really don't know what I wanted to do, and I just nodded back to what I know, and what I knew as a kid growing up was fond memories of how people get around a table and look after themselves by having good food, good home cooked food. So it was definitely hospitality lines. But going into chocolate was really interesting. First of all, I loved it, but the second part of it was the science behind it. It was really interesting. And that later got me into doing my Master's of Science in Food and Drink, because I was so involved in it wasn't just about eating chocolate, it was about the understanding, the profiling. I was very fortunate to go to Madagascar and see where they were growing cocoa beans. And it's much more than just putting a a bit of food in your mouth and actually enjoying it, that gives you the instant gratification. But I was more interested about the business angle, how you can gift somebody, a box of chocolates and what that means. Yeah. So occasions, Valentine's Day and that. So I really set the company up. It was actually, I started making items for weddings when I worked at the Marcliffe. And then a few folk afterwards, can I buy your products? Where can I buy them from? And I was like, well, you can't, because I'm just doing this as part of my employment. So that's probably how it really started getting requests from like corporate companies. Can we buy your items? Well, no. And I remember coming up with the business kind of concept. It took 6 weeks to come up with a name. And it was quite a slightly different name, but it was all about the premise of cocoa coming from the kind of cocoa bean of the origin, and ooze when you bite into it with passion, with that knowledge and that really tasty element of it. So I remember going to my first networking event and said, well, Jamie from Cocoa Ooze, cocoa what? And really having that, oh my God, have a creative type name, have I done wrong, Yeah. But really, I would always say the premise of creating a Cocoa Ooze was never only just wholeheartedly being a company to make chocolate. I always thought, and always created Cocoa Ooze was much more than just a chocolate company. So we did experience days, workshops, events, parties. We did gifting, we did corporate, we did partnerships. So it was much more than just a food and drink company. It was much more, it was almost a community in a sense of what we're trying to do. And also a big part of our role in running the business was education, educating about good quality produce, and also selling the story of local, buying local. We're proud. Unfortunately, our cocoa beans didn't come locally, from Africa and surrounding areas, but actually could we work with local partners? And I think people really bought into that. We were, I wouldn't quite say a household name at times, but really were people known about us. And actually, it really flipped in the years coming out of that, where we were really hustling hard to get clients, and then clients naturally started coming to us. And then it was having that, building the brand from, one store, two store, then building to a manufacturing site, and then Dragon's Den in 2016 that you've mentioned. So there's been many kind of pinnacle parts to that, quite kind of complex, but to me, it was just almost me having fun, creating a brand and really getting behind that brand. I think as founders, it's so important that you absolutely 100% believe in what you do, but also validate that as well with other people, because you think it's great, but other people think it's great as well.
Yeah, is there a want for it, for sure.
100%.
Yeah. So did you launch fully on your own? Did you have you mentioned other people that's kind of helped you along the way, that you've met along that journey? But was there any kind of mentors or other kind of shareholders that came in and nurtured you along the process, or was it all just kind of jumping in yourself?
Yeah, but probably a bit of both, to be honest. There's probably not one person that kind of sticks out, because for me, hustling at networking events, speaking to people and constantly absorbing that knowledge, and I'm never shy to ask a question. So always asking that question. Originally started as a sole trader, and then a couple of years later I went to a limited company, and then opened our first store out in Peter Cooter and then Belmont Street. But I think for me, I always tried to not quite separate between my family and kind of my work life, but have that sort of kind of element of family, because our Sunday lunches used to always become almost a bit like the annual AGM meetings. You know what I mean? Because you're constantly involved in that. But I think from a local perspective, I was involved in sort of kind of mentoring support, and having that ability to ask questions to somebody. But I always used to watch, videos, or I actually used to watch Dragon's Den quite a lot before I appeared on it, and now I don't watch it at all. You know what I mean? So, but just picking up sound bites that I could almost formulate. I'm quite a natural creative individual, so I used to formulate all that together and almost formulate a process or an opinion or a way of doing something. Sort of constantly learning, always learning from that opportunity. In mentors, I've had a couple in the past. I would say some good and maybe not so bad in my eyes. The one not so bad was like, no, don't do this, don't do that. And then I did do it, and it actually turned out to be the best decision I did make. So I think when you have a mentor, yes, there can be a great sound advice, but the accountability always lies with you as an individual, and it can be a lonely and isolating place. And I think you've always got to remember that, when you're taking advice on board, But we are blessed in Scotland, I think personally, to have so much public and private level support that we have got compared to other countries. But I think we've got to make sure that we don't create a culture of you've got to stand on your own 2 feet as well as entrepreneurs, and put something back to society is so important.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of veers into the role you're playing today. But in terms of obviously Marcliffe starting up selling chocolates on the side, I guess, corporate type weddings, events, etc., to then that decision point to go fully in to the Cocoa Ooze business and kind of full launch, full time. Was there certain thoughts and fears that were in your head at that point, or was it just a case like, I'm having fun with this, let's just give this a bash?
Probably that I know that I can't run on 2 hours sleep per night. It was probably actually the pinnacle point. I remember a couple of jobs after the Marcliffe, I was like, something's got to give here. I was like, am I going to let down clients? And I'm very a man of my word. What I say I do, and I follow through with that. And the biggest thing for me is follow through on that customer. If I've committed, doesn't matter if I've got to work all day, all night. But I remember doing Royal Island Show, and I was working like 3 days solid on like limited sleep, and I went, this is not sustainable. And as entrepreneurs, we go, oh yeah, I've worked how many hours? And actually, to be honest, when I hear somebody say that now, I'm like, you're not smart with your time. And I think back then I wasn't smart with my time. I was working, 60, 70 hours in a job. Then I was trying to run the business and trying to focus on my days off. So I wasn't getting the time and space. And I think from my health perspective as well, I went, I can't continue to do this. We're not invincible. I'm a human being. And I went, I either do it now or I don't do it ever, 100%. Yeah. So I handed my notice in, and it was almost a case of, what have I done? But thankfully, I built up a brand that people knew about. I was starting to develop that marketplace. People were trusting what we're doing. Return customers, went to a farmer's market and went month after month, and folks said, I saw you last month, I'm here to buy again. And I was like, well, folk obviously like what I'm doing, So that sort of repeat customers was brilliant. Then we started having corporate clients, and I would say over 90% of our customers were return customers. So it made it a really easy. But for me, building a business is all about trust, relationships, and partnerships. I never see it as one and done, and it should never be like that. But unfortunately, a lot of people, take profit over that partnerships or that personal approach. I always flip it. Money making was never. That sounds really bizarre as an entrepreneur. Money making was never the first point for me doing it. It was about having fun, giving something back, and that ability to do it. And remember when I did pitch on Dragon's Den, they were like, "Oh, you've got low profits." I'm like, "I'm reinvesting, constantly reinvesting my money." There wasn't a day gone by we wouldn't donate something to a local charity or a gift voucher or something. So for me, it was much more than just running a business. It was about that cause and that importance to be in that, and also being a good citizen. I think as mentoring somebody or holding that hand out, and looking back to the support that I got previously. Now, what could I support somebody else? That is so important to know that we're all human beings, and just being kind, I think, is so key.
Yeah, huge. And do you remember your first staff member, your staff hire? How did that feel? And
yeah, well, my first unofficial staff hire was my mum.
Yeah, okay.
She helped me. And I remember when we opened our Peter Cooter store. Before that, like the amount of work that my mum and dad did was incredible. You know what I mean? And my dad being the joiner, fitting out the store, and I'm probably being the son that had been over demanding. But I wanted to get it right. I was so critical on that, and we pretty much went from no staff members to 7 in our first store very, very quickly. Some of them were part-time workers, and with some cracking members of staff that actually stayed with me right until we sold part of the business a couple of years ago. So we thankfully had some good members of staff. I don't know how they lasted so long under me, to be honest. But I think taking that element of that human approach. Yes, I could be quite demanding. I'm not going to shy away from that. I think because my ambition, nature, and personality comes through. At the height, I think they had roughly about 30 members of staff within the business. Probably employed well over 60 plus in total. A lot of students within that, that came for a defined period of time and left, so natural. But yeah, I've always had good people, and I think whatever business predominantly most businesses are run by people. So you've got to have that people first approach, and I've definitely had that. I definitely made some not so great hires, I would maybe say, or maybe not the right cultural fit. Um, where we are in Aberdeen, I think the challenge around that is really difficult. You're competing against other sectors, but we could offer something. A lot of business maybe couldn't offer. The flexibility, the work patterns. A lot of our workforce, 90%, were mums who worked, which was perfect. So we had demands in our business that we could kind of put up and down. So seasonal variations, so Easter and Christmas. So they could have the whole summer off, and then we could then back for Christmas. But so we were very flexible in how we created it. So we never really had one size fits all. It's about a flexibility approach.
Sure. And how do you find that then helped from you touched on the word culture there, but by you having that kind of flexible approach with them, did you find that then was returned in their efforts and contribution?
Yeah, 100%. They knew when they had to put the hard days in and when they could kind of ease up as well. In culture, something you really can, you can have your vision, mission, values on the wall, and you can start a chant if you wanted to, but actually culture's got to be created. I don't think it can really be, told to staff members. I don't think it can be, here's day one, here's your induction. This is our guide to. I think culture creates its own, in its sense of that kind of being of a business or an individual and how they feel connected to that. I don't think you can definitely create that. Some companies maybe have been quite good at that, but you've got to bring people on that journey, and sometimes the way I, as a founder, my head's going like a 200 miles an hour. You're constantly thinking about work, but try not to forget about that people and take them on that journey with you. That's probably a little bit of my kind of failing, not like a failing, just being so busy and trying to memorize that. But yeah, I've definitely worked with some incredible people that are far more knowledgeable than me. And that's great. But again, surround yourself with good people.
Yeah, good. And then how soon after opening the first store in Peter Cooter was the second? And, did that come with bottlenecks and restrictions and I guess personal impact as well?
Yeah, really interesting because the first opened in 2013 and the second store opened in 2017, roughly from memorize and dates. And I thought, well, the first store, it's going to be bigger. We can just replicate the model. By God, I was wrong. I was completely naive to it. So Peter Cooter, a nice, suburban, area, commuting town, a lot of kind of older population there. Town, completely different, right in the heart of Aberdeen, completely different customer base, completely different culture, completely different setup. Night and day, And I remember, again, my dad fitting at the shop, and I was like, God, we need to open this place now. It was quite rushed, we to get it open and what we did. And if I didn't open that day, I probably went bankrupt, to be honest. It was really quite tight. But I kept all the companies under the same company, and it was probably maybe a little bit of a failing for me. But Peter Cooter was running perfectly. It was great. I remember we surveyed our customers, and over 200 responses we got, and I thought I was quite proud for a wee suburb town to actually say, no, this is what we want from you, and we didn't listen to them. We thought the big lights of opening a bigger store, and that really taught me that bigger isn't always better. We were really profitable at Peter Cooter, and then we came into Aberdeen, and it was a nightmare. I was working 7 days a week. We had a couple of managers in there. It was a different ask. I was unprepared for it. I was unprepared probably mentally. I was unprepared physically for that journey, and really tried to define that proposition. We ended up closing Peter Cooter and deciding to put all our eggs into that one basket. It was great for a period of time, but the boom and bust of kind of Aberdeen oil and gas, came and goes, and as you know, it always does fluctuate, and that was really difficult, for us. But I'm a man of my word, and I doubled down. We took on some additional debt. We kept everyone in post, and a lot of people didn't know that happened. But we had to have a level of staff levels, so we never made anyone redundant. We kept, and did it pay off? It paid off to a degree, but for me, we had to to refocus on what we did, and that was towards probably a year or two before COVID, and redefining what we did, new brand, new opportunity, then you know, I don't want to say COVID, but COVID, you know, came and really we had to focus. But at that time I had some you know, other opportunities and did a master's degree and all that, so quite a lot going on with that. And I wouldn't quite say I fell out of love with it. I just had to refocus, and I think I was so emotionally involved in the business. I think I had to take a step back, and that sort of 2017 to 2020 period was an absolute reset for me as an individual. And then what do I want out of this? And I think it's so important to remind why you do what you do, because you can get so coloured within such a busy landscape.
Yeah, brilliant. So much to unpack there as well. But so that was a kind of 2017 to 2020 period there. Obviously, a year prior, the whole Dragon's Den experience comes about. I have no idea how the behind the scenes works. I'm very intrigued, as probably people listening or watching this will be as well. But how does that opportunity come about? How does the whole process work? If you was to take us behind the scene, fly on the wall type thing.
Yeah, I don't know what I'd like to tell you and not, but I'll probably just be honest and tell you what I know. And I wouldn't like it any other way. I was doing some trade shows down in Glasgow and Birmingham, and they've got researchers, effectively what you call scouts, that are out and about. And I remember seeing their badges, and I was trying to play it cool, but I absolutely couldn't play it cool. I'm like, oh my God, there's Dragons Den. Like, I'm hustling, I want to speak to them, you know. And I'm then trying to go quite blasé, go, do you want to try my product? And where are you from? You know, clearly I can see their lanyards, I can see their badges. And, have you ever considered that? I don't know if we really need it. I try to play the cool card, you know, but eagerly excited, like there's also my details as well. And I remember them contacting me a couple of months later. And I never expected to hear anything. And they said, I would like to you know, have a call with you. So it's quite a long period. I think from initial call to actually filming, it was 6 months. You know, I remember going down to Manchester, and I couldn't tell my team what I was doing. And effectively, I was pitching to researchers. And then I remember every time they're like, we'll let you know how you got on. If you're through the next stage, you'll hear from us. You nothing, nothing. And then I heard something, but it was almost like, you know, almost a bit of a, it felt like almost like a six-part interview. Almost, it felt like that kind of next stage. And they always kept saying, even if you get filmed, there's no guarantee you'll actually be on TV. So it was always a caveat, you know. I was almost like, well, it's a reality TV show, making sure I was good content, I suppose. That's kind of what I kind of read into that. And I remember when I got the email to say, we'd like you to be filmed in front of the Dragons, I was like, wow, well, first of all, I don't know what dragons are going to be on there, because, you know, they change in maybe every so often, but I knew, you know, it would be Deborah Meaden and Peter Jones. And I flew down with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, Rosie, so she was the only person that knew what I was doing. I couldn't tell anybody, and that was hugely quite isolating, you know, to be in that experience, and really quite nerve-wracking. We stayed down the night before. She took me to a really nice restaurant, and we got to the studio at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there was 4 others there, so the filming in batches over a prolonged period of time. And it was really interesting. I'm not going to kind of spoil too much behind the scenes, but just really interesting how much people they have to create that program. I think it was like 30 odd staff, you know, like they were involved from hair to makeup to legal, you know, you've got that brand on your stand, you can't have that, you know, because it's all about, you know, protection, all that as well. So a great opportunity, and one I would jump at the chance of doing again, 100%. You know, I was nervous as an individual. I really enjoyed the experience, but really I did it for exposure, and we needed money. Like, we needed money to expand, you know, end off, because a lot of folk go in that, you know, for exposure, you know, and I did it for both exposure and we needed cash. You know, got the cash, and, you know, unfortunately it fell through. It was around the time of Brexit, and it took a Sullivan who invested in us, you know, had other assets in Europe, and, you know, one of our investments fell through. So we're so close to the end of the due diligence. That was quite a kind of long process as well, but, you know, great opportunity for us to reset. So for me at that point, rebranded and did all that. But no, Dragon's Den, unfortunately, I don't really watch it anymore. I watch it occasionally, but because I know so much behind the scenes now and how it's all constructed and put together,
so maybe I probably spoiled it a bit.
Yeah, I get really frustrated, to be honest, of it. You know, like I know the lift concept. I know, you know, where it's filmed. I know so much about it now that it's a reality TV show. You know what I mean? It's about that, you know, customer, and appeal to it, but it's fundamentally is also a business program as well. And the people I met throughout the journey were incredible. The people who work behind the scenes, couldn't do enough to support you, because quite a daunting experience. And also having the opportunity to pitch my business on Dragon's Den. I think it's only been a couple of folk locally, so I almost felt like I was flying the flag for the Northeast as well. I felt it was a good opportunity to do that. And I said, and the money didn't come through, unfortunately, so I had to then seek capital elsewhere, which just allowed us to reset again and what we did.
Yeah. And did you get much interaction with the dragons actually on the day when you were there, or was it just you're in, film, out, see ya?
I think the filming from memory was about an hour and 40 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, but what you saw on TV was 13 minutes. And I got a really good edit. Some people get a really brutal edit and really harsh because they always home into the numbers. At that point, we're about £500,000 company. We weren't making much profit, and then after that program, then we kind of sprouted up. And it was great success for us. But we got a really bad airtime date of, I think it was 28th of December.
Oh wow.
2016. So the challenge with that is everyone is absolutely stuffed from Christmas, already done all the Christmas gifting.
Yeah.
Okay. And I remember we bought all these branded boxes and we launched a new website, and it was carnage.
Yeah.
It was absolute carnage. I was down trying to flog chocolate in January when everyone's on diets. Thankfully, Valentine's Day was just around the corner.
Yeah.
But oh my God, it was like risk constantly. And then low reward, no reward, big reward. It was just a complete, always risk that to reward ratio was always kind of battling against that, to be honest.
Yeah, but great experience. And overall, did that have a positive impact on the business?
I would say in the short term, yes. People still mention it to this day.
Yeah.
10 years on.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I think it was actually shown in Australia last year because they sell like the rights to time and time again.
Yeah.
And I kept getting loads of LinkedIn requests from people in Australia, and hi, can I buy your product? And I'm like, well, we're no longer going. And that's like 9-10 years on.
Yeah.
So definitely that impact is there. It's in the domain, but I got a lot of good feedback from it as well. And an advocate to as a business owner, you have to put yourself out there. May that be online, offline, Dragon's Den, whatever it may be. And that's what I do in my own role. Currently where I work, you've got to put yourself out there and be that opportune, because I'm definitely I'm definitely an opportunist without a doubt.
Yeah, 100%. That's class. So before, obviously, then exiting Cocoa Ooze, you mentioned selling off part of the businesses there. How did that kind of come about? I know you mentioned there was health scare and a reflection period where you're like, is this worth it for me in longer term? But are you able to go into a little bit more detail on how the personal realization and then obviously the decisions in the business that were made at that point?
Absolutely. And I think for me, it was my personal health care. It was mental health. I was just doing too much. So I took a breakdown. And I remember coming back from a holiday and, probably about 2 years of my life that I took to kind of reset. But I mean, I don't wish that on anybody, but for me, that was a real turning point in my life. But I felt I had more to prove at that point. So I went and did a master's degree, never been to university before, and plunged and did it. But that was to prove to myself that I absolutely could do it. And I'm incredibly hard on myself, I'm sure we've all got critics out there, and I'm my number one harshest critic is myself. I can be a terrible overthinker, but I think from my anxieties and mental health, it really taught about I need to have the business working for me, and it wasn't working for me. So what I then did was I sold our coffee shops, so sold the leases and focused back to our manufacturing. Went and did a degree, a master's degree. And at that point, it kind of almost, I would like to say, my journey in my business and mental health and all that combined was a real turning point for me. And I probably had a bit of a fork in the road. I could continue this, but am I truly happy? What does happiness mean? Or I could go left and I could, explore the opportunity of giving something back. And that's the path I chose. So naturally, when we sold our shops and then COVID then came, we sold our equipment and all that bits and pieces. So effectively 2022, the business kind of went through we closed up the business, and I chose that path of actually focusing on and helping other people. So since 2017, 2018, I've been employed and I've had various jobs, and it's always been about helping people, relationships, partnerships, and even in my role at developing a young workforce now, now giving something back, and it's about that kind of pride and impact. But a lot of it, there's always got to be turning points in your career, and I think I've had lots of kind of twists and turns. I never take the A road and go A to B. I always seem to take the kind of A to Z back to C and right through, the alphabet, to be honest, and how I do it, and not forgetting B within there all as well. So I think I've always just done it my way, and I think I've been, incredibly, delighted with my career. I look back, and I don't think I look back in anything with regret. Maybe how I potentially could do things, maybe change slightly in the future. But I am proud, but I always just keep saying it's just Jamie, it's just what I do, And I remember a lot of folk, saying, look up to you, and I'm going, it's just me, and it's just how I do it. Everyone's got an opportunity in life.
Yeah.
It's just how you want to take that, and it's up to you. Your destiny is in your own hands. You should never be defined. You can always define your own destiny. And I think that's, every path, you can create that path because it's unwritten.
Yeah, love that. And the role you're doing now, obviously, DYW, is that almost feel like a bit of like a passion project as well, fulfilling, and obviously you mentioned early on about like helping people and providing that thing. So how does that look daily compared to, maybe back in 2017 when, there was a lot going on there? How's it looking for you now for you?
I'm privileged to be my role, and I think even my previous role at Business Gateway, helping businesses and young people to unlock the potential for having a great region and supporting that future workforce. So we predominantly work with 16 to 24-year-olds, but we've got young people who support, educators and businesses within that. So I'm looking at our value proposition at the moment and what we're doing. We are a national programme, but very much delivered locally, and the programme's been through great things in the past. Now it's almost like DYW, as my chairperson at 2.0, and for myself coming, we've got a new host where we're based. We've also got some new board members. So it's a real good opportunity for me to put a mark on it. And it's not just my mark, it's like our mark, to leave that lasting legacy. So yes, probably a little bit, I wasn't looking for a new job, and then the job kind of got presented to me, and I kind of batted it off. And I remember speaking to the recruitment consultant for a goodwill of an hour, and I was like, I just don't know. I love what we do, but really I want that ability to take it to the next level. And that was the opportunity presented to me, was you can really take this and make it bigger and better. So for me, it felt like starting again in a new challenge, which was great because I'm not a pencil pusher, and that's not me. I am an ambitious individual, and I actually remember at my interview there was a question asked for me about focus and clarity, and I turned around and I went, I am an ambitious individual, and I won't apologise for that. And it was almost like a bit of a mic drop moment, like they're never going to hire me, absolutely never going to hire me. But they seen the ability and want that I wanted to where I wanted to create it. So I'm now 3 months in, and we're on a journey. That's what I would say. We've definitely got lots to do, but by God, what we do is great. And I've got to pinch myself a little bit at times because we do some great stuff. Now it's about how do we elevate that, and we are getting back to basics on some of the stuff because what we do is not complicated. And I suppose how we then do it, we're getting that clarity and that purpose. And that's going back to about supporting that next generation. That's a future workforce. That is the people who we need to support, to making sure we have a great economy here. Whether people are going to work or are going to be entrepreneurs in the future, it's about supporting that generation. And the key thing to me is empowering young people. We can't put people in boxes. We have to empower young people, and that can mean different things to different people. But I'm staving off at the moment my entrepreneurship angles, but I definitely think our theme in the future will be making sure we support more of that enterprise, but because whether you're an entrepreneur or intrapreneur working in a company, there's different angles, and I think actually as a region we can prosper better by harnessing that opportunity. And I'm really excited by the opportunity, and I know my team and my board are behind it, which is really good. So I'm just a person who gets to the opportunity to lead it forward. So it's like running my own business within a business, but I don't have to worry about the payroll, the VAT,
cash flow,
all that. Don't get me wrong, I still have to get our finances in order, and we've got a tight envelope to work within. But I'm now looking at opportunities in sponsorship in the future, co-design programs, and really have that opportunity to really elevate what we do. We're public funded, but looking at the private sector, how can we unlock some more of that potential? So it's a really great time for me to come in and really create that 2.0 next.
Love that. In the work that you're doing, obviously, it sounds like you're quite involved in the strategy level at the minute, in the 2.0 relaunch, if you like. But in even previous roles of Business Gateway, helping startup companies, starting young people, what's maybe some common things that you see that maybe holds people back from being able to harness their own skills and actually being... I think when I look back to when I was younger, you're almost like try to just keep your head down and not really stand out. But what are some of the things you maybe have seen over the years where it's like, if we can just embrace that, if young people can just embrace that a bit more, it'd be like, it's a difficult question. But
I was going to say maybe twofold to this actually. One part that people maybe don't believe in themselves enough, self-doubt. It's anxieties and that, like I said earlier on, that gets in the way, the imposter syndrome. So we need to build more resilient founders. I think we're great at building businesses in Scotland. Scaling businesses, maybe not so much. As well as there's an emphasis on startup, but you've got to start somewhere, which is great. But building that resilience, so basic things that you can learn, communication, teamwork, collaboration, but also that emotional part as well. I think is so key. So I think definitely for founders to be a bit more emotional aware, and also numbers. So numbers shouldn't run your business, but you should have a good handle of them. So a good understanding of a basic profit and loss forecasting, because a lot of business owners fly by the seat of their pants, and that's great, but there will be burnout there. There will be, natural kind of attrition in the business, wherever it may be, from people to finances. I think to understand that, you really have to understand your business. So I wouldn't say people to be accountants. That's not, you've got an accountant, you've got an advisor to do that, okay? But understand it. So I remember when I built our own website, we used an agency for it, and I went and did a 10-week web design course, not to build our website, but to be knowledgeable. So I think the power of knowledge is key, so not to be an accountant, but understand your numbers. Not to build a website, but understand how it is. So when they're going off jargon, and I remember being in a web design meeting and somebody chatted to me and I went, "Oh, is that such and such? How do you know that?" And I went, "Well, first of all, don't be fooled." You know what I mean? And I think I've got a thirst for learning. I love to learn. I've been on multiple short courses from leadership to financial accountant, not because I want to be an accountant, but because I want to understand about how things together. And I think that maybe goes back to my understanding the science part, of almost deconstructing it. And I find that really bizarre because I didn't do well in science at school, but I understand the science of business, understand how things work, relationships and all that. That almost encompasses, so probably a two-part answer there.
Love that. And just to finish, conscious of your time, but what would be the best piece of advice you'd pass on to founders looking to start or scale in business today?
Wow, yeah, really, God, I've never been as succinct as maybe just one, unfortunately. But be honest with yourself and be good to yourself. Running a business is an incredibly exciting but daunting place. Enjoy it. I think it might sound so simple, but going back to what I'm trying to do at the moment and previous, simple but done well. I think is key. So have that theme running through it, and probably the power of saying no. I've always jumped two things in, but latterly I've started saying no to a lot of things, and actually it feels instant kind of gratification to that. So I would say probably a couple of things throughout there, and that should stand you in good stead. but also make sure you have a good product or service. You
Yes,
know what I mean? I think
yeah.
it's key to that, and surround yourself with good people.
Appreciate your time, Jamie, and hope you enjoyed that episode.